From Arizona, Mr. Schweikert is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Pro Tem. Mr. Green caught us a little bit off guard. He suddenly stopped, and I'm not used to him doing that. All right, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, we're going to try a couple things tonight, and I'm going to try to do this as efficiently as possible. And I hate doing it this way, but part of what I'm going to do tonight is respond to just basically a little bit of, actually a whole bunch of just the absolute misrepresentation that keeps coming into our office. So every week, for years, I come by here and I sound like an idiot economics professor when I walk through these things, trying to help our brothers and sisters here in this body who might be crazy enough or not have enough of a life to watch a presentation like this, to walk through the math. And it's a simple philosophy. At the end of the day, the math will always win. So I'm going to try to do three things here. I'm going to try to actually get the reality of what happens, how the tax system works, when our brothers and sisters on the other side say, oh, you just raise taxes, that will cover everything. I'm going to show our history that it doesn't work that way. Second thing, I'm going to show a series of proposals we've made, and these are only my responsibility, so don't blame another member of Congress, of how we have this current reconciliation budget. We're going to have another one that sort of starts again this summer, because remember, we functionally have, depending on timing, you could have 3 bites of the apple on reconciliation. Why do we do reconciliation? It's a way to get through the filibuster in the Senate under the 1974 Budget Control Act. And I have brought pieces of legislation to reform Medicare Advantage, because you've seen the Wall Street Journal stories, the ProPublica stories of the functionally, the criminality that's going on. The MedPAC report that basically shows hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud because of what some of the insurers are doing. I'm a big fan of a capitated healthcare delivery model because your incentive is to help people be healthier. But if you have a system where you can make stunning profits by scoring people as sicker, we got a misalignment, and that is not what Medicare Advantage was designed to do. It was designed to actually provide a package of delivery to make you healthier. I'm going to show a little bit of data on a talent-based immigration system. And over the previous weeks, I've come here before and shown we got a demographic crisis. We have a shortage of young people. Think about this bit of math. Take the last 20 years, 20 years ago and today, we functionally have the same number of 18-year-olds. But the number of people 65 and up has doubled. So over here, I have, my 1,000,008 18-year-olds. Over here, I've gone from 35 to now almost 70 million of our brothers and sisters who are 65 and up. You have a shortage of young people in this country. Unless you deal with that reality, but you don't want to open up the borders. That's the disaster. You make people poorer by bringing in people to compete with your working poor. And that's the cruelty of what the last administration did, is they crushed working people's wages. I want to grow the economy, grow productivity, make the society wealthier, and we're the only country in the entire industrialized world which hasn't moved to a talent-based immigration system so we can grow, we can compete. Look, slightly off the rhythm I wanted to use, 1970s, 80s, the world competed for hydrocarbons. Last decade, we competed for rare earths. This decade, and the economists say maybe the next 2 decades, the world's going to knife each other for smart people. In a world that basically is heading towards flat population growth, maybe we should show up to that battle, because we educate people here, we educate them with our system, then we send them home to compete with us. Have we lost our mind? And to President Trump's credit, he's talked about this repeatedly. So forgive me, I'm going to have to reach over here and do a little sorting of these charts because they're out of order. So I'm going to give you that one back. And look, so let's start this. First, I need to work up some principles. if you actually look at our history, I'm going to show a couple charts of this. Times when we've had fairly high marginal tax rates. Let me do it on this board. This one's actually a little easier to understand. You guys mixed up all the boards. And sorry about that. I'm going to give you that. Well, actually, let me just use this one. It's not the board I wanted to start with, but let's work through it. If you take a look at what we spend and what we take in tax collections, here's your structural problem. We've had times with very high marginal tax rates, very low marginal tax rates. Go back over since the 70s. We always seem to end up somewhere between about 17.5 to mid-high 18s. High marginal tax rates. We're still getting 18% of GDP in tax receipts. And when we talk about these things, you'll hear us talk about as a percentage of the size of the economy, because it's too confusing doing dollar amounts, because inflation, those things, the dollar amounts change. So when you hear someone pretending to be an economist, we're going to talk in percentage terms. We've had times where we've had very low marginal tax rates after the Reagan Revolution, yet we still got the same percentage of the economy in total tax receipts because the economy grew bigger. Our crisis, particularly the last decade or 2 decades, is this gap here. We're heading towards now spending 25% of the entire economy. So think about this. This year, where the economy has actually been fairly decent, we're doing okay in our tax receipts. We're right on target. But our spending, we're going to borrow about 7.2, 7.3% of the entire economy this year. And that gap is the debt and deficits. And when our brothers and sisters on the left keep saying things like, raise taxes, we've done that. Remember, we've been experimenting this since, the 16th Amendment, when we've had times of raising the high marginal tax rates, low marginal tax rates, and somehow the growth of the economy is what fluxes. And therefore, the receipts we get, we call them tax receipts, we don't call them revenues, the receipts always sort of stay right there in that mean. And the reason, and I'll try if I can get my boards in some sort of order here so they make sense to us. And forgive me as I get myself organized here. We grabbed them and they put them in out of order. What should scare us to death is right now, the percentage of all tax receipts required to cover interest. This year, for every dollar we take in, 16 pennies of it cover interest, just interest. In 9 budget years, 30%, actually that's 8 budget years, 30% of every dollar we take in tax receipts will just cover interest. Now, I didn't bring the chart, maybe I should have, because it's been mixed up. If we had a 1% increase from what we expect baseline interest rates to be, Mr. Speaker, would you dare in your head to guess, so in 2034, 2035, 30% of all of our tax receipts is just covering interest. 1% interest increase, we get up to 45% of all tax receipts is just covering the interest. That should scare the crap out of people. But are we allowed to explain that almost every dime, well, the vast majority of the debt increase over the next decade, it's interest, and God forbid we tell the truth, it's Medicare. We got older. We have a shortage of young people. So let's actually sort of walk through some of the reality of what our brothers and sisters say on the other side. So this is an article, it's actually I've used it before, it's one of the best in sort of explaining the reality of the math and also reality of the lies. They're just outright lies. We got to tell the truth. So this is written by Jessica Riedel, and it's written back in 23. But what was done is they took all these tax proposals that the Democrats have proposed, the ones we have scores, and then did the economic modeling. Let's have rich people, we'll raise their capital gains tax. We'll take wealthy people and we'll raise their marginal income tax. We'll raise their estate taxes. All the things that we get in our town halls and discussion groups, just tax rich people. That takes care of the problem. Here's the math. And the beautiful thing, what Riedel did here is actually took economic data from all sorts of studies, from left-wing groups, from just statistical modelers. And when you read it all, almost every proposal the left has given us, if you add it up, so raise the estate tax, raise investment taxes, raise corporate taxes, raise individual income taxes. By the time you're done, you might pick up another 1.5 of GDP in taxes for the U.S. Treasury. Did you hear my voices a couple moments ago? This year we're borrowing 7.3% of the entire economy. So next time you have someone on the left say, just raise taxes on rich people, go online, Manhattan Institute, pull up the study, and walk them through the actual math. Now, I've got to tell you, I have a chart for those on the Republican side who we walk through some of the things we want to cut. We can have a revolution in the cost of government if we're willing to redesign. There's a difference between redesigning programs and cuts. But many of the things we talk about cutting, we get only 1%. But once again, why this is so important here. When the left says, well, you don't have to cut anything, just raise taxes on rich people. That's not what even their own economic literature says. But of course, that would require literacy, wouldn't it? Someone would actually have to sit down and read this stuff with a calculator. We have a crisis. And having a society that's getting older is not Republican or Democrat. It's just what we are. It's math. Look, if we're not willing to tell the truth, we can continue to use our campaigns, all right, a slightly non sequitur. We're going to get a new Social Security Medicare actuary report in the next couple of weeks. And I know we'll all be just giddy to actually read it and see what it says. But if we look at last year's, it basically said in 2033, so 7 years, 8 years from now, the trust fund is gone. It's emptied because every month, Social Security gathers payroll taxes, and there's a shortage. So they take their special T-bills, because they've loaned money to the general fund, and they cash those in. They get that money back from Treasury. Treasury goes out and borrows the money, but they get that plus interest. In 7 years, they have no more special T-bills to cash in with the general fund at Treasury. In 7 years, if you get a Social Security check, you're taking a 21% cut. We will double senior poverty in America in 7 years, double senior poverty. This is a really moral place. So how many idiots, electeds do you see come behind these microphones and say, it's a Democrat problem, it's a Republican problem, it's a human problem, we're going to fix this. And then the lying that goes on here, last year I did an entire series of charts, which the Democrats turned into attack ads, that showed raising the cap, when you raise the cap. So every dime someone earns is subject to the full Social Security tax. It only covered 38% of the shortfall. And we didn't even do the economic effects of how much the economy slows down when you do that. So the solutions you hear repeatedly from our brothers and sisters on the left just mathematically aren't true. Raise taxes. You get 1.5% of GDP. In 9 years, we're borrowing 9% of the entire economy. Well, for Social Security, just raise the cap. Okay. And don't give any benefits. That's the other part. Keep the benefit formula at where it is today. Tax people on every dime above that formula. So what is it, about $170,000 today. Take every dime above that to put the full, 12.4% Social Security tax on it, but don't give any benefits for that. It only covered 38% of the shortfall. And that first full year, I think we were modeling it for 2034, that first full year, the shortage, that if you said, well, we'll just pay for it out of the general fund, I think was $608 billion, so almost 2/3 of our entire military budget. So if you're someone that comes to me and says, David, I want to protect the country, I want to protect the military, I want to do this, I want to do that, tell the truth about our demographics and the earned benefits that actuarially are collapsing around us, but we're terrified to step up and do the math and tell you the truth. So we start to actually walk through actual solutions. So if I came to you right now and said, let's see if I can find the right charts here. So I did a whole presentation over and over the last 3 weeks on Medicare Advantage. So 2005, Republican idea to buy capitated managed care policies for seniors. And the idea was there'll be a benefit package and the insurer will actually make money by helping people be healthier. Well, over the years, some of it was in Obamacare, other things, it got screwed up where the insurers were making money by scoring people as sicker. So in 2005, the model for Medicare Advantage is it's going to come in at 95% of the fee-for-service costs. And look, I'm sorry to geek out on this, but this is important. Remember, 55% of Americans are on Medicare Advantage. I represent an area with terrific penetration because we have very robust networks and those things in the Phoenix area. But it was supposed to come in at 95% of the cost of fee-for-service. Today, according to MedPAC, because I know we all read the MedPAC report, it comes in at 120%. Just that difference last year is $100 billion. When the Wall Street Journal does 5 major series of the fraud, misrepresentation, let's call it misalignment, when the Justice Department has leaked out, made announcements of not only civil suits, but criminal suits, criminal investigations that are going on, maybe this place should pay attention. And the beauty of it is this type of scale of waste and fraud being the largest in the entire country. Remember, our preliminary score from CBO of Medicare Advantage is $1.84 trillion, making that bill the single biggest savings bill for a single bill in U.S. history. And I've already introduced it. You see the discussion, the debates going on in the Senate right now, but it's scary because you got to get up in front of the American people and explain, okay, this is Medicare Advantage. What we're concerned about is not the health care you receive, your earned benefits, it's what the insurance company over here is doing, and that's why they're under criminal investigation. I'm sorry, it's uncomfortable, but our job here is to tell the truth and make the math work. Second thing, the reason I'm walking through these is we've introduced 3 bills that cover every dime of the reconciliation budget, and add, I think, maybe even an extra $1 trillion of savings. So remember how I mentioned before one of the crises we have in the United States is we don't have enough young people. So we've introduced a talent-based immigration bill. Now this is actually, I'm actually surprised I haven't taken more beatings, but I'm sure they're coming. We're functionally the only country left in the world, industrialized world, that uses a familial-based immigration system. It's your family sponsors the next person, the family sponsors the next person, so on. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, everyone else has gone to a talent-based system to maximize economic growth in their countries. We haven't shown up to that. But if you listen to what President Trump has talked about of the insanity of educating people and sending them home to compete with us. Maybe if we move to a talent-based immigration system, we stop educating them here, send them home to compete with our economy. It turns out that actually comes in at producing $152 billion of savings. And the amazing thing is in the second decade, that with some of the expensing of research and development, those things, you get a substantial economic growth. You get productivity. This is how you actually grow the economy so you have the resources. Have the resources to come our promises. The other bill we're doing that's actually going to be sort of fascinating, let's see if I can try to explain this. This one is less about cutting spending. It's about finding cash that's sitting up and down the government in accounts. Some of these things have hundreds of millions of dollars that have sat there for years and years. We call it unobligated funds. And look, there's those that are I did this chart just to try to explain, and there's no year, it's sort of cash was assigned there, but the way it was authorized, there isn't a particular year it has to be spent. There's those that actually, it was a 2 or 3 year commitment. We borrowed the money, we stuck it in this agency's accounts, and it sits there, but it hasn't been spent. Then there's those where it's actually money that actually, they never used all of it. The crazy, crazy thing, if I came to you and said, what would you guess? Now, look, from a policymaker, I deal with the reality, I'm never going to get all of it. But if you add up all that, what we call the forgotten funds money, it's $1,524 billion. So if anyone else is playing along, I have Medicare reform, $1.8 trillion. Talent-based immigration, $150 billion. If you got, let's say we were able just to get part of the expiring provisions, that's $540 billion. I just covered every dime, we just covered every dime of the reconciliation budget. There's no borrowing. And you maximize economic growth because you're not engaging in the crowd-out effect of having to go to markets. Remember, we borrow $6 billion every day. In 9 years, we borrow $10 billion every day. We've got to do things like this so we're not competing with you, your family, trying to get a mortgage, trying to get a car loan, trying to, what your credit card interest rates are going to be. Think of this. In the last 12 months, half of all the debt in the U.S. bond markets, half of it, has just been the United States federal government. So your school district, the company that wants to expand, all the bond market that's supposed to be helping finance the growth of this society, this country, half of it now is just the federal government. And it's going to get worse. I'm giving you 3 bills that cover every dime of the borrowing. None of them cause burning and slashing and, and mashing of teeth and the whining that happens around here. And it turns out they're all really good policy. And this is the constant argument I keep trying to make to our brothers and sisters here. We're going to have to do policy, and policy is hard. It's complex. There's armies of lobbyists walking around this campus here, and the inefficiency of the federal government is their profit model. There's bureaucracies who despise the concept of saying, maybe you should use technology. I have a report on my desk, and I've only read like the first 3 or 4 pages from the IRS, and it's an analysis of their data. Turns out the crazy thing, the chat, the computer answering the phone at the IRS has a higher favorability rate than when a human's answered the phone. Maybe we should stop being scared of adopting the technology because remember, last year's taxpayer audit said only 31% of the phone calls to the IRS were getting answered. Yet the IRS union attacks you for saying, maybe we could use technology. Oh, you can't do that. Well, now we have the survey data that shows The chat that answers the phone, that answers your questions, that walks you through your tax form, also has a higher favorability than the human. It's uncomfortable, but it's math and the facts. So look, as I try to walk through a couple of these things, and look, I'm going to just show this board, even though I'm going backwards. Did I mention my boards are out of order? You see that red area? That would be the savings on the Medicare Advantage. We're still going to spend, there's still 14 plus trillion being spent on this program over the next 10 years. And the crazy thing, this idea of fixing the waste, fraud, misalignment, this reform bill could be Republican and Democrat, because anyone who's bothered to actually read the MedPAC reports for the last half a decade knows we have a problem. How do I get the talent around here to not be terrified of the army of lobbyists and actually step up and do what's hard, but do what's right? And Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster here and see if I can get to some of the points. That would help make sense. And I was just saying this a moment ago, but maybe it's easier with the visual. This is baseline. This is our baseline. Almost every dime of this growth from the baseline spending is the growth of interest and Medicare. Today we borrow $6 billion a day. In 2035, functionally for us it's 9 budget years, we borrow $10 billion every day. Okay, so let's do that simple math in our heads. 10 times 365, and it's actually not 10, it actually comes in, I think, at $10,400,000,000. So it comes in like 3.8 trillion is Moody's, who did the analysis on this, Moody's Analytics, that in 2035, we're going to borrow $3.8 trillion that year. We're going to borrow 2.2, 2.3 this year. And that's just sort of built off of what our baselines look like. And why this should terrify us. CBO has us, over the next 10 years, adding another $22 trillion of debt. If interest rates move now, because now you need to calculate the higher interest rates, if you start to put those dollars in, we're not completely there, but we're getting close to the next 10 years. We borrow as much as we did the previous 240 years. Okay, this has got to be the dozenth time I've said this on the floor, and I can't seem to get it to sink in, but that's the underlying math. And what should also be scaring people to death, yet the hallways are full of people coming into our offices demanding more money. The United States now is like number 12 or 13 on the credit stack, meaning, take a look, Greece today can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States. We have 18 states that can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the federal government, but yet we borrow money to send to our states. I mean, take a look at this. Does this not just curl anyone's toes, but yet somehow magically we think the money tree is going to continue? So look. Let's see if this visual helps. Think of the protests, the whining. I won't use the word bedwetting because I think that's just inappropriate for a member of Congress to say. Baseline is the federal government intends to spend $86 trillion over the next 10 years. $86 trillion is the CBO baseline. All we're talking about in the budget reconciliation was a $2 trillion savings. 86 spend, 2 trillion. To give you an idea just how absurd this debate is, so tomorrow we're going to do, I think, a rescission vote. I think it's tomorrow, maybe it'll be Thursday. Think of the angst, the protests. We're upset. David, you can't lower spending. Okay, let's see if we can do this. How many hours are there in a year? 8,700 hours in a year. Work with me on this, Mr. Speaker. 8,700 hours in a year. The rescission package takes care of 28 hours of that 8,700 hours of borrowing. Yet you listen to people come behind these microphones and it's like the world's coming to an end. Please understand, this is just the beginning. If you want this federal government to be able to stabilize and survive, when you have the economists on the left and the right saying, look, if we can get to about 3% of borrowing of GDP, we can stabilize. We're borrowing 7.3 this year. In 9 years, we're borrowing 9% of the entire economy. Understand what this means. That would be reduce spending this year. So we're going to spend, what, 7.3 trillion this year. You'd have to reduce federal spending by 1.4 trillion to get down to 3% borrowing. The vote we're going to have in the next day or so on the first part of the rescissions package covers 28 hours of borrowing for a whole year. And yet I know I even have members on my side who are all puckered up running around saying, oh, how do I explain that? Do you understand how much trouble we're in? If we're borrowing about $72,000 every second of every day, in 9 years we're borrowing over $100,000 every second of every day. I've shown you before in the charts and the reports that the Democrats' plan of just raise taxes on everyone doesn't get you anywhere close to what's required. Remember, every tax hike they have, 1.5% of GDP, and we're borrowing over 7 this year. We need a revolution in how we deliver services. Yet, Mr. Speaker, I will tell you right now, you look at the lobbyists walking up and down our hallways, they despise, the bureaucracies despise anything that changes their business models. And I want to extend the apology, Mr. Speaker. I know my boards were a little disjointed because they came out of order. But the concept was very simple of this presentation. It's 3 things. The scale of the borrowing. There's actual policy solutions that you can pay for everything we're doing right now if we'll actually open up our brains, open up our minds, open up our calculators, and actually look at it. And that a number of the solutions actually don't need to be partisan warfare. Now, we'll turn them into partisan warfare because we care much more about winning the next election than we do saving the republic. Mr. Speaker, I'm in a 50-50 district. Now, I'm blessed. I represent a really well-educated population. They're fairly prosperous, they're smart people, and they've tolerated, not because they're thrilled about what I say, but I think they believe what I say. I go to great lengths to get the math right. There is hope, there is a path, there's a solution. I also have one of my economists that makes it very clear we may have only about 36 more months and we start to hit what's referred to as sort of the interest rate feedback loop. Remember, a year ago, I think we had 3 or 4 months where this government had to borrow money to pay for our borrowing. If today the 10-year bond is at 4.5, you realize if it goes to 5.5, in 9 years, 45% of all of our tax collections are just interest. Let's not let that happen. Let's get our act together. Let's communicate to those people we borrow money from that we're serious on some fiscal sanity, because that's how you maximize the efficiency. That's how you lower the interest rates for every American. And that's how you give our kids and your retirement a future. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.